What is truth? Do you have a definition for it? And, even if you do, how do you know when something is true? Congratulations, you are officially doing epistemology, which, along with metaphysics, aesthetics, ethics, and logic, is one of the main branches of philosophy. Epistemology explicitly aims at uncovering the nature of knowledge. The term comes from the ancient Greek verb episteme, meaning to know, to understand, to be acquainted with. How do we know when we know things? How do we access truth? How do we justify claims to truth? These are a smattering of questions that epistemologists confront on a regular basis. You probably won't be surprised to hear that a lot of really smart folks have proposed a lot of really smart ideas for how to tackle these tangled issues. 3 broad ways of grouping epistemological claims come from Susan Archer Mann and Ashley Suzanne Patterson. They present epistemic traditions as empiricist, standpoint, and postmodern. Here's a very brief rundown of each. Empiricist epistemology says that knowledge is best determined via the tools of science. Knowledge comes through our ability to measure, test, and predict the natural world. Empiricist models presume some degree of reproducibility, as in, if the variables are controlled, then we ought to be able to test things and get the same result again and again. It is through this reproducibility that we can access so-called objective truths. That is, truths that are independent of the vicissitudes or fallibility of any given individual's perspective. A worry for this view is that it discounts alternative ways of knowing. In its appeal to objective truth, we might be missing out on individual and cultural wisdom that holds essential knowledge. Enter standpoint epistemology. This is the idea that knowledge is situated, as in, the position of the knower holds an undeniable influence on how truth is defined. Claims to objective knowledge are irrevocably taking for granted a broader historical and social context, effectively pretending we can control for background beliefs and remain unbiased. Postmodern epistemology basically takes this concern and runs with it. Like standpoint epistemology, postmodernism recognizes that knowledge is always situated. Postmodernism then goes a step further, though, and takes the stance that no claim to knowledge can be privileged over another. In this view, knowledge and truth are nothing more than functions of things like social power. If one person claims that, for instance, murder is wrong, and another person says that murder is right, there is no way, in principle, of appealing to any sort of objective reality to verify either claim or resolve the dispute. We are forever constrained and entangled in webs of language and power. Escaping these is an absolutist fantasy. These 3 broad schools of epistemology capture a lot of what's at stake, whether we can access objective reality or whether we are inescapably trapped inside subjective perspectives. While the language varies, these issues are at the heart of a lot of Western philosophical debates. Concerns over claims to objective knowledge are partly what motivated the development of American pragmatism. In his book, The Metaphysical Club, Louis Menand traces the impetus of American pragmatism to a period shortly after the American Civil War. The devastation of this war facilitated a culture of distrust over absolutist claims. In the shadows of so much death, destruction, and ideological fervor, the progenitors of American pragmatism wanted to approach philosophy with an attitude of fallibilism. An attitude, in other words, that all claims to truth must be subject to revision if the evidence demands it. American pragmatism is associated with a group of thinkers in the mid to late 19th century who aimed at radically revising and resituating the Western philosophical tradition. This movement is perhaps most commonly associated with Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. American pragmatism is a varied tradition associated with many different theorists over many decades. C.S. Peirce, the man who coined the term pragmatism, recognized this fracturing very early on, which even motivated him to change what he called his philosophy from pragmatism to pragmaticism, which he said was a name ugly enough to be safe from kidnappers. If there is any idea that tethers all pragmatist thinkers together, it is perhaps that it's a philosophy of action. Indeed, the term pragmatism comes from the Greek word for action, and shares its roots with terms like practice and practical. Pragmatism is a philosophy of action in the sense that it deals with how things actually exist, move, and engage in the world. The earliest practitioners of pragmatism were greatly influenced by the revolutionary discoveries of Charles Darwin and wanted to develop a philosophical framework that did justice to the fact that we are evolved and evolving animals. Hot off the heels of Darwin, the American pragmatists wanted to explore the radical philosophical implications of seeing us as fundamentally related to monkeys, trees, bugs, bees, and dirt. Pragmatism is related to action in another important respect, making the world a better place. While there are many ways that pragmatists define truth, one element comes up time and time again. Truth, and our ability to know truth, is intertwined with what makes the world a better place. John Dewey was the first of the pragmatists to recognize how radical of an idea this was, particularly in terms of social justice. As a philosophy, pragmatism has always been committed to a philosophy of life, as in how theory and practice interrelate to change lives. Dewey, in turn, argued that pragmatism was a thoroughly democratic philosophy. Really, it was democracy embodied, because it took seriously the lives and experiences of everyone, not simply those in power. Dewey's recognition of this has, unsurprisingly, made him the go-to classical pragmatist for modern-day feminist pragmatists. Feminist philosophy broadly is emancipatory in nature. It aims at both understanding and changing oppressive social systems. For reasons that are too complicated to get into right now, American pragmatism was largely marginalized in academic philosophy departments for many decades, sidelining its potential. It wasn't until the 1990s that theorists, and specifically feminist theorists, started to recognize and engage with the radical emancipatory potential of pragmatist thought. The philosopher Charlene Haddock Siegfried was the first thinker to argue for an intimate and mutually fruitful cross-pollination between feminism and pragmatism. In her 1996 work, Pragmatism and Feminism, Reweaving the Social Fabric, Siegfried breathes life back into Dewey's emancipatory ideas while simultaneously informing them with much-needed feminist insights. She writes that John Dewey repeatedly testified to learning from women's experiences, and he fought publicly for women's issues. Women studying with the pragmatists were empowered to trust their own experiences and to challenge the system. It seems that from the beginning, feminism and pragmatism have been mutually transformative, though this relationship has not yet been adequately recovered. Much of this mutually transformative relationship can be traced back to the philosopher and social activist Jane Addams. Addams and Dewey had a long and fruitful philosophical relationship. Dewey was hugely influenced by the ideas of Addams, most notably through her concept of affectionate interpretation. Addams was renowned for her commitment to helping others while also remaining compassionate in the face of injustice. She argued that all seeming conflict and antagonism was only misunderstanding, a tension in the progress toward a common outcome. Interests, if they are worth securing, are mutual. And affectionate interpretation is, for Jane Addams, the means by which we understand how we secure our mutual interests. This was an idea that radically changed Dewey's understanding of social change. From these mutually transformative beginnings, both schools of thought have diverged and developed in unique ways. All the while, many of their conclusions and commitments have remained essentially kindred. Some of these radical philosophical commitments include taking experience as a primal and pervasive foundation for all theorizing, adopting a process ontology that views us and our environments as integral, relational, non-reducible unities, a broad focus on community and the social, and a rejection of common philosophical problems that presuppose such dichotomies as subject-object, reason-emotion, and appearance-reality. Feminist pragmatism also holds a commitment to pluralism regarding experiences and values. Siegfried goes so far as to say that this approach, possibly more than any other philosophical movement, defends the legitimacy and irreducibility of multiple perspectives. Feminist pragmatism is deeply committed to pluralism in every respect, be it ethical, ontological, or epistemological. Feminist pragmatism even reflects this pluralism back on itself, always aiming to recognize any theory or theorizer's situatedness, all in the hope of making explicit its own interpretive space and revealing hidden assumptions. Remember when I mentioned that a lot of the history of Western philosophy dealt with the debates around whether we can access objective reality and find some sort of capital T truth? Feminist pragmatism, in its commitment to pluralism, is suspicious of the notion of capital T truth. Much like standpoint and postmodern epistemology, feminist pragmatism recognizes that our claims to knowledge are always situated. However, rather than adopting the postmodern view that knowledge claims are therefore incommensurable, feminist pragmatism rejects the entire construct of the debate. At the heart of the traditional approach to epistemology is the idea that there are isolated subjects in the world and that truth exists out there, somewhere, in objective reality. As mentioned, feminist pragmatism rejects the dichotomy of subject and object, and instead adopts a view that all our knowledge extends from human experience. This is, of course, a fallible perspective, but it is one that takes seriously individual experience and also all the epistemological and scientific tools at our disposal. It embraces the messiness because the messiness is everywhere. We are animals. We are extensions of nature experiencing itself. To the extent that we can access truth, it is fallible and must be open to revision. Why? Because everything is in flux, our experiences and our flowing entanglements with the world at large. This fallibility and flux act to challenge hierarchies. It motivates us to take seriously the experiences of everyone, not because any single individual perspective is an ultimate authority, as there is no ultimate authority, but because our ability to fruitfully and effectively navigate the world depends on us, depends on how we act and treat each other and our environments. For feminist pragmatists, what is true, how we can know it, what is morally right, and what exists in the world are all issues entangled with human experience. There is no objective world out there, and no isolated individual in here. It is all together, circuitously intertwined and inextricable.